Are you ready to pay more tax? There are now big questions over whether Labour were honest with us about tax rises during the election campaign. We all remember Sir Keir Starmer saying this.
We will not raise tax on working people. No tax rises for income tax, for national insurance, for VAT. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT.
It's the working people bit, I think, isn't it? But Rishi Sunak was adamant that that wasn't true.
He would put up everyone's taxes by £2,000. £2,000 in higher taxes for every working family in our country. After all the hard work and sacrifice we've been through, that's not the right course of action.
So, last week, an independent pay review body said wages for NHS workers and teachers should go up by 5.5%. Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimated that a 5.5% increase across all public sector professions would cost us about £10 billion. And Chancellor Rachel Reeves is hinting that she will do this.
At the moment, we are looking at those pay review body recommendations, doing the analysis, and we will work with public sector workers on that. But we also know that there is a cost to not settling, a cost of further industrial action, a cost in terms of the challenge that we face in recruiting and retaining doctors and nurses and teachers as well.
But this idea that Labour didn't know what financial position the country was in, or that the Tories have left us in the worst state since the war, are being rubbish now by ex-Chancellor Jeremy Hunt.
What is absolute nonsense is this business of the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I mean, you only need to look at the last time a government changed hands between parties in 2010. Compared to then, inflation is nearly half what it was. We had markets collapsing. Now we have the fastest growth in the G7. It's a very transformed picture. And I think the reason that she's doing this is that she wants to lay the ground for tax rises.
People called this, didn't they? They thought, OK, maybe Labour will get in. They'll say, oh, we've had a look at the books now. We've had a look at them. It's worse than we thought, and taxes will go up. So the questions are this, aren't they? Did Labour lie to us about tax hikes? And do you want to pay more tax to give public sector workers a pay rise? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. It's a good one. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone. We've got journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and the former chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, I'll start with you. Do you think Labour lied to us about tax rises?
I think absolutely they lied. And I was just listening to Rachel Reeves there. I don't believe a word this woman says. She just said there's a cost to not settling. So what does that mean? Every time a union demands a settlement that we're going to have to pay because she's saying it's cheaper. Cheaper to who? You've just read out a figure there of 10 billion quid. That's what it would cost if she gives all the public sector people the pay rise that they actually want. And Reeves will not say where she's going to get this money from. Starmer said before the election that working people would not suffer any tax rises. But I mean, we just know this is nonsense. And I just want to come on.
I work. I work. I hope that I won't get any.
Exactly, I work too. And I just want to get on about what Jeremy Hunt said there. When she is absurdly putting forward this idea that our economy is the worst it's been since World War II. He touched on there. He said, we have the fastest growing economy in the G7. Our national output is projected to grow, or it has grown by 0.7% this year, which is the highest in the G7. And we have the lowest debt in the G7. How are we a financial economic basket case? I just don't understand. It's tosh, and he's right when he says she's done that because it's the preemptive thing before she puts taxes up.
Yeah, all right, Benjamin. So, I mean, people called this a mile off, didn't they? And now it appears to be happening, which is, we'll have to review the books. I mean, the books were actually publicly available, and it turns out, shock horror, they're going to say, well, this is worse than we thought it was, and we're going to have to renege on some of those promises. Oh, and this pay review body says that 5.5% for all public sector workers. Well, we've got to give them that. Not because we're in the pockets of the unions or anything. We're just going to do it, and we're all going to have to pay. So did they lie to us about the tax rises, do you think?
No, I don't think they did. Rachel Reeves has said clearly that you cannot tax your way out of the situation we're in. We already have the highest taxes in 70 years from the Tories. And the truth is, the state of the UK economy isn't only poor since COVID, it's been poor for about 8 years. We've had anemic growth in this country that has put us way behind countries like the US. We're doing nothing like as well as they have in the last 3 to 4 years. And I think the truth is that, private sector wage growth has been between 5 and 6% for about 3 years now. And so the idea that the public sector has had less than inflation constantly shows that they have had a raw...
But they do also get... I mean, first of all, the thing is to say, Keir Starmer fought this election saying, I am going to put politics back in the service of the British people. What he's really done, he's putting the British people back in service of the trade unions, which is what the Labour Party always do. They, at the same time, let me finish, at the same time as in the King's speech repealing every meaningful strike law, they have also made a statement saying, well, of course we're going to give you an above-inflation pay rise because there's a cost to a strike. Well, guess what? The unions will have heard that and go, right, you can't stop us striking now because you've rolled back nearly 2 decades of anti-strike law. Whatever we ask for, you're going to give it to us. And in the public sector, the reason that they've had inflationary pay rises, they get a gold-plated pension. They basically cannot be sacked no matter how bad they are at their job. And, you know, the deal always was you get paid slightly less, you get much better terms and conditions. The deal apparently now is we want to be paid more than everyone and have the best terms and conditions as well.
Because Sunak resisted the strikes by the doctors and the rail unions, that's why the cost of living crisis abated and inflation plunged.
Correct.
If he'd given them at the time, they would have carried on rocketing. And that's what this lot are going to do. And while at the same time punishing the wealthy and entrepreneurs.
The reason we had inflation incredibly high was not because of people's wages, right? And the arrogant lecturing from a Westminster insider like Mr. Berry, who has left public service employees in food banks because of how dire that they have had. Just sit here and lecture working people who can barely afford to put food on the table.
So head teachers, most head teachers in this country earn over £100,000. Now, if your head teachers in this country earn over, in secondary schools, earn over 100,000, I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't, but if you earn 30 grand working in a factory in Lancashire, why should your tax be put up so you can pay a head teacher of a secondary school 106,000? You may never earn that in your whole life.
You want to get working people fighting like rats in a sack. I want higher wages across the board.
You invoke the food bank argument every single time you talk about anyone in the public sector's living standard. It's just tosh. You know, we heard it last year about nurses using food banks. I don't buy that either, because what you don't hear when you hear about nurses and doctors, they get incredible pensions that are higher than anybody else's. We pay like 20% for every pound they earn, something like 20 pence for every pound they earn. It's outrageous.
What about the moral argument, Jay, that we all who can afford it, maybe, should be paying more money in tax to help people who are the arteries of this country, our public sector workers?
Well, I mean, what I think is a real disgrace is a senior nurse will now, because taxes are at a record high, you say about America's growth rate, by the way, they've got much lower taxes in the UK. I think how high taxes were under the Conservative Party was absolutely appalling. But what I find very distressing now is senior nurses are having to pay what, for most of my lifetime, has been the top rate of tax. They are paying 40% of tax. That now kicks in at 50,000. We are paying far too much tax already in this country. And you cannot have growth as your main aim as a Labour government and tax people. And then the final question I ask, which I think is really important, if public sector wages go up almost 3 times faster than inflation, how fast should private sector wages go up? Because you don't get your gold-plated pension. This will lead to out-of-control inflation, which is the real tax that will hit everyone with a mortgage in this country.
I will ask you this. What I wonder whether or not Labour have really factored in here is you look at people like Daniel Kabidi, who is the head of the National Education Union, OK? Now, this is a chap who is massively to the left of where the Labour Party at the moment, has attended, you know, the trade union kind of Marxist conferences, as is, of course, his right to do that. But my point is this, which is that 5.5% is not going to appease this guy. No. Right, so you're going to start with 5.5%, and then the strikes start again, and you have to get more. Is this just where we're going to end up with a cycle of pay rise, strike, bigger pay rise? Is this setting this in motion?
Well, what's so condescending is to try and say that paying people properly who've worked incredibly hard, who've had some of the toughest jobs in the last couple of years, teaching and health has been, you know, a complete mess for some time, that paying them properly somehow puts the government in the pocket of the unions. Let's look at the facts. You know, the amount of Labour donations that they got from the unions has never been lower. The head of Unite the Union, the biggest union in this country, she is not a Labour supporter, which is unprecedented in modern times. They are not in the pockets of the unions. What they're doing is trying to be in the service of working people.
Let's look at these facts. You've had a Labour government for 3 weeks. They've done an inflation-busting pay rise. It is putting the taxpayer in the service of the unions. It is completely wrong, and it's the opposite of what they said in the election.
Every single union now is going to go on strike because they know that if they do, they're going to get the money.
Correct.
And that's not going to happen.
There you have.
That's
The right-wingers want you to be poorer.
Okay. Just very finally, I think this is a crucial point, and please be quick with this, Jack. Did Labour know the state of the finances before they came into power?
Yeah, of course they did. The Office for Budget Responsibility, which we brought in 2010, it publishes every year. It's just a con.
So, OK. All right. Thank you very much. A lively start.